Hello everyone, it's Lady Kirbis with Lost in the Shuffle. This afternoon we are going to continue our exploration of the Forest Folklore Tarot by British illustrator Kessia Beverley-Smith. This is part 3 of our exploration of this deck, and this afternoon we will be examining the artistry, the elementals, and the motifs. To begin with, let me just say that this is a very well-conceived tarot project. The Forest Folklore Tarot is inspired by the New Forest, an ancient woodland in England. The blended watercolor and photographic cards feature forest wildlife with fairies, gnomes, nymphs, and imps from legend. Let's check out the packaging, which we did not do in the previous videos. It is a standard tuck box. Produced by US Games in 2004. Standard tarot size cards printed in Italy. The deck has not been reprinted. The little white book is just that. While it's not very long or in-depth, I do like that the book shares the artist's unique description of each card. These are the 2 extra cards in the deck, sort of the title cards. A little bit of information here, a statement from the creator. And of course, we can see the card backs. Sometimes these cards are useful as bookmarks, things like that. First stop, the artistry. The borders of this deck are a gorgeous, deep, dark green. The art itself is slightly quirky, but it's wonderful, it's magical, and it's endearing. The combined photography and watercolor are probably what give this deck its unique, quirky, magical feel. Kessia's artwork is predominantly watercolor with a few photographic elements. Friends and family of the artist posed as models for the cards, and each has been assigned a card that either matches their personality or, failing that, aligns as much as possible with their physical attributes. Where their faces have been included, it works well. But I want to point out that not all cards have a real or photographic face in this deck. Some people have remarked that the integration of the photography in this deck sometimes misses the mark. First of all, not all cards in this deck integrate photography. Some cards are full-on, beautifully rendered watercolor, and we're going to look at those first. Secondly, sometimes the integration of photography works extremely well and appears seamless. At other times, the integration is more obvious, and it can make the figures look somewhat posed, artificial, or their expressions might look a little frozen. So let's look at the artistry of this deck, starting with some cards that illustrate good examples of the watercolor. This is the moon card. And it gives us a very good foundation into the color palette that Kessia is using for this deck. A lot of deep dark greens and various shades of green, blues and purples, gold, goldeny yellows. It's a palette that is inspired by the forest. If you've ever been in the woods and there's a certain amount of shadow when you're deep in a forest, the light is cut significantly. So there is a little bit of a depth of darkness and dimension to this deck. The color palette has deep, muted jewel tones. This is the tower. The sky here is a beautiful example of the delicacy of Kessia's watercolor work. And here as well in the Hermit card. This is one of the watercolor examples with the darkest palette. It's beautifully rendered. Two paths in the woods that are carpeted with bluebells, and of course one path is lit by the 8 wands. Beautiful color, beautiful watercolor work. And each of the aces features an animal that is native to the New Forest. The Ace of Swords and the Ace of Rings are particular favorites of mine. They're wonderful examples of the quality of the watercolor work in this deck. And now let's move on to showing some examples of how the photography is integrated. And the first set of cards that I have show where the photography might be considered a little heavy-handed. You take a look and be the judge. All right, here is one example where I do think the photography looks posed and the facial features look somewhat frozen. And perhaps in the Ten of Rings also, although I find the pair of dwarves in the Ten of Rings to be just charming. So what do you think, guys? You think it's gone too far? Subtle? What do you think? All right, here's an example where you might think, again, that it looks posed. The photography might look posed and the image might look too frozen and separated from the watercolor background. It's a little more obvious in the Five of Rings, isn't it? Not so much in the Four. Not so much in the Two. All right, and then I also wanted to share some examples where I thought the photography was very well integrated. Let me just take a sip of water here while you contemplate the Hierophant card. This card is beautifully rendered. I think she does a good job with the King of Wands. I think the integration of the photography works well in this image. The King of Rings, he's quite jolly. And his Queen. Oh, I have these separated out. All right, well, I'm going to wing it here. On to the elementals. So the cards are inspired by legends, wildlife, the mythology of the New Forest area in Hampshire, England, and they feature elementals or nature spirits. Some people think of them as house spirits. And Kessia is using them in the form of dwarves, fairies, nymphs, imps, as well as humans in these guises, and always placed in the natural surroundings of the New Forest, which incidentally is currently comprised by about 45,000 acres. I would love to visit one day. So a little bit about our elementals. They embody the four primary elements of our world: air, fire, water, and earth. Usually, they cannot be seen through normal eyes. However, once you make yourself aware of them, they may be kenned or seen clairvoyantly. In other words, perceiving the unseen with your senses. Have you ever experienced an elemental? Now, our suit of wands is associated with fire in this deck. Just going to pull out some examples. Here's the card that I said I think looks like Angelina Jolie, the Queen of Wands. Now, this is one that, as I'm looking closely at it, is not using a photographic image. It appears to me to be a completely watercolor rendering. So I think it's just, coincidental that I'm making that Angelina Jolie association. But these are some examples of the wand suit. And they feature fairies, mythical beings of folklore and romance, usually having a very diminutive human form with wings and, of course, magical powers. A few more examples. Seven and the 4. This fairy's handing out wands. And the 3. Let's take a look at the Ace, which features one of the ponies of the New Forest, and look at the diminutive fairy here in the pasture near the pony. The suit of cups in this deck is associated with water, love, and happiness. So the wand suit that we just looked at, let's just recap. The wand suit in this deck is associated with fire, enterprise, and distinction. And the suit of cups is associated with water and concerns of love and happiness, shall we say. And this deck this suit features water sprites and nymphs. Just check the framing here. Water sprites and nymphs. So these are minor divinities of nature in classical mythology, represented as beautiful maidens. Or here we've got a male water sprite. This is one case where we've got a human in the guise of a water sprite. And I kind of think that the cup suit in this deck features more humans or water nymphs in larger human form than any other suit in this deck. One thing I want to point out about this deck is the diversity of age and gender. We've got young and old and mature, and it's a beautiful card. And our ace. We're going to move on to the suit of swords, which in this deck is associated with the element of air, but I say that conditionally. We're going to talk about it. And of course, the suit of swords traditionally deals with struggle and animosity. This is the 8 of swords. All right, so Kessia is using imps in this deck as her form of elemental. So these are small demons or little fiends that are mischievous and they cause trouble. Now, my idea is that Kessia used imps in lieu of salamanders, although salamanders are more typically associated with the fire suit. So let me talk about that a minute. In traditional tarot, the suit of wands is usually associated with the element of fire, which is what Kessia did in this deck. Symbolizing passion, creativity, and action, while the suit of swords is traditionally associated with the element of air, which is what Kessia did on the surface. Okay? However, some modern or personal interpretations of the tarot suits sometimes suggest a reversal of those associations. Some people feel more comfortable associating swords with the transformative power of fire and wands with the dynamic energy of air. So even though Kessia associated the element of air with the sword suit in this deck, I think that by using the meddling action of the red imps in this suit is more in keeping with the fire element and is more similar visually to a salamander vibe. Let's see what you think. So salamanders are a type of amphibian. Okay, there's the imp right there. An amphibian with a lizard-like appearance, smooth, moist skin, a long tail. Differing from lizards because they lack scales, claws, and ear openings. And they also have a mythical association. Salamanders are thought to be mythical animals, mythical creatures that have the power to endure fire without harm. People used to think that they lived in your fireplace. Here's the Queen of Swords with a red imp sitting next to her on the tree stump. Now, real salamanders have spots typically on their heads. They could be orange or yellow. They could have some spots on the rest of their body, but their overall color tends to range in the darker black, blue-black, dark gray, or dark brown color range, which is different from what we're seeing here. So note the bright red color of these imps. The imps who both witness and help to create struggle and animosity in the sword suit. Check out this Knight of Swords. Their red coloring definitely makes us think of fire. And in contemporary pagan practices, red is often associated with the South Quarter and the element of fire. I think it's interesting that Kessia didn't choose to emphasize yellow in the sword suit, which is the color most associated with the air element in contemporary paganism. Rather, she mixes the energies of both air and fire in the sword suit. Here's our Lady of Swords. There's the imp. The color red can also symbolize love and passion. It can symbolize danger and warning, courage and sacrifice, anger and war, and it can symbolize festivity. When it's paired with green during the winter holiday season, we definitely have a festive feel, don't we? And interestingly, restaurants use the color red to stimulate appetite. Did you know this? Here's our Ten of Swords, and there's our imp. The color red creates a sense of urgency and excitement in customers. Red is an effective hunger color because it can increase the heart rate, heighten nerve impulses, and boost energy levels. It puts the body into a state of readiness for eating. Isn't that interesting? All right, so we're going to move on to the Suit of Pentacles, which is the Earth suit concerning money interests. Okay, we got a good view there? I think so. So this suit features dwarves. In folklore, dwarves are small, legendary beings who are often a bit misshapen and rough looking, and they are known to be quite skilled as craftsmen, which is very fitting for this suit, and which features gold rings instead of pentacles. And our Knight of Rings. And last, I want to comment on the motifs in this deck. So we're going to look a little bit at the major arcana while we do that. And let me take a sip of water first. So, motifs, reoccurring thematic elements, often in the form of a pattern, a design, an idea, a color, or an image. And in this deck, there are several important motifs which are beautifully rendered. We have trees. We have toadstools. We have ferns and flowers. I love the strength card with the bluebells. Stones and rocks feature very heavily in this deck. As do plinths. Check out this Empress card. She is seated on a stone plinth, as is the Emperor, her counterpart. The Tower card heavily features stone in this deck as well. We've got a lot of starry skies in this deck, such as the Hermit card. Black cats, see it here in the Wheel of Fortune. Dogs, also shown here in the Wheel of Fortune. We've seen horses. Snakes and serpents feature heavily in this deck, as do eagles. I think we've got eagles on at least 3 cards: the Emperor, the Empress, and the World card. It's another snake on the Magician card here. Looks like a German Shepherd with the Fool card. And I personally love the owl in the Star card. And then we've got another good example of the starry night sky motif that's featured heavily in this deck. Overall, the Forest Folklore Tarot is a very well conceived deck that maintains its focus consistently. Some decks drop their focus, often in one particular suit or sort of halfway through the deck, and you see the creator noticeably lose their steam, and it weakens the deck overall. The promise of the conception, the thematic conception of the deck just isn't fulfilled. This deck does not lose its creative focus or its steam. The woodsy, elemental watercolor art is slightly quirky, but that's one of the things that I like about it. It's wonderful, it's very magical, and it's very endearing. This deck works well for both positive and intuitive insights in your readings, as well as sensitive shadow work. There is both light and shadow in this deck. And as I shared in the 2 other videos about this deck, I feel this deck is underrated and deserves more love and attention. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this series devoted to tarot. I know you're watching because you love tarot, and I'm making these videos because I love tarot too. Please subscribe so we can hang out some more and talk tarot again real soon. And until then, stay cozy.